Anyways, thank you very much for sticking around. You all are the grizzled veterans of this conference, but it's been a great conference, I think, and a lot of interesting talks, a lot of interesting thoughts, and I'm supposed to wrap it up somehow or other. I have a number of slides here around the notion of themes and challenges. The themes are the themes that I heard touched on throughout a number of the talks, and of course it's a limited list. Doesn't cover everything. It couldn't because there's been so much good stuff that's gone on. That aside, there are some challenges involved in some of these themes, and I'll mention them too. So that's what I'm going to do for the next 14 minutes and 4 seconds. There's a little timer up here. Okay, good. Firing away. Themes and challenges. Here's a list of them. I wanted to say something about, as you can see, individualization, unbundled curriculum. That was Gershenfeld's comment, and it's also been around somewhat. The competition. I want to say something about the competition because we want to consider the role of games and simulation. Finally, instructional design, development and authoring, implementation. I'll see if I can be merciful and dive through this really quick. First, we've been collecting data on empirical studies of games for some time. This is games, hardcore games, compared to classroom instruction. So it's kind of a messy thing, because you'd really have to take the Rich Meyer approach and see, what's in the games and what made them work. This is just a sloppy big number. On the other hand, when I begin to look around and see what effect sizes you get for games, it's usually about 0.6 or something like that. So you get about effect size of 0.6 and 0.6 standard deviations. And on the other side, for affective outcomes, you get something around 0.49 or whatever it is. I would say something about individualization because it came up so often. You'd be interested to know it's been around for a long time. I asked Pat Suppi some time ago, what are our first principles in this business? And he said, individualization. He's always said that. That is the key thing behind the use of technology and instruction. He's always said. And that's a fellow who's been awarded the Medal of Science, so he deserves to be listened to. And of course, the empirical basis is that everything is constructive. Seeing, hearing, memory, everything is constructive. It's not stored as little chunks in our head that we bring up. So we construct it. Unbundled curriculum, that was something Alan Gershenfeld talked about. Here's the problem. If you have a kid, if you have a classroom of kids, let's say 16.5 kids, which I think, it's 26.5 is the average. And so one kid is studying quantum mechanics, and another kid is studying the human genome, and another one is trying to read Chaucer in Middle English. How are you going to prepare a teacher to mentor and help those people? How are you going to select a teacher who can mentor all these kids doing all those different things at the same time? I think that's a problem, and it's an interesting problem. Let's go. The competition. Again, we want to say something about the competition because we didn't discuss much what the role was of games and simulations in the curriculum, in education. And that remains a problem. So we've had some experience with that in the Department of Defense, so I bring this up. And we've had some successes. This is the IMAT display, interactive multi-sensor something or other. It's been around for a while. But the interesting thing about this is that, for instance, IMAT training produced a 10 decibel tactical gain at-sea trails. That would have cost about $1 billion if you had to do it strictly by hardware alone. So that's training. I use the T word, training versus hardware. And also, anyways, the unbundled curriculum, that seems to be where we were. Let's touch that. Okay, there's that. I didn't want to say much more. The competition, we've got all these things. That turns out to be Ed Link himself there, and I understand that that's Orville in the original thing. So we've been using simulations for a while, and the point is that if games are a form of simulation, then we probably do know a lot about the use of games in education and training, and considerable. Anyways, IMAT findings down here, talking about this business. One of the things is that if you, 2 days of training with a laptop version increased the submarine search area by a factor of 10.5. So you've taken your $2 billion submarine, and all of a sudden it's as if you had 10 submarines in the same area. It's not bad, not bad. All thanks to training. And of course, we've got this business here, which is a huge, you have a, I don't know, you got a tank driving around in Texas and you're being attacked by a helicopter in Alabama, and you call up for F-16 support from somebody in Nevada. That sort of thing can happen in real time on the electronic battlefield. Simulation and computer games. I want to say a little bit about the differences between the two, and because we didn't say enough about that. I've made the point that all games are simulations, and I made it loudly and here, there, and elsewhere. And then I got a note from this fellow in Netherlands that said, "No, that's not true. All simulations are games." And that the master is, the master of the overview is actually games rather than simulation. It's an interesting thought, something that we might all consider for a while, because it's fun. I don't know what the complications of that are. I did want to show you what has been done in simulation-based training. Now, this concerns training of Navy IT technicians. So this is information technology technicians. And they were compared against two groups. One, these ITTC kids who had had 35 weeks of training, fleet people who had had an average of 9 years experience in the fleet, and the digital tutor kids fresh out of boot camp who had had 16 weeks of training. 16 weeks of training on a digital tutor. You may see the differences here. This is D, so it's Cohen's D, and the differences between the DT and the fleet is 4.3 standard deviations. Huge, huge difference. Now, the thing is, Lord help me if I had to go take my, I guess my final exam in differential equations or something like that. I suspect, again, somebody fresh out of school would, that probably would be some huge, huge difference for me. So it's not really fair to do that to the fleet. But these kids, same thing, but classroom trained. They've been trained for 35 weeks, and here's what you get. Now, this is a serious test. It's 4 hours of testing. It's not just something you throw at it. It's short answers, a few essay questions. So it's not a trivial examination. I think the main thing, though, this is training. So you want to know how can they do the job, and it gets to be important. So down here, you'll notice that compared to the fleet, these are kids, again, they haven't been in the Navy for 6 months yet, and there they got an effect size of 0.85, which is noted as a large effect size. And of course, the IT kids, 113. So huge differences. The point of this is that we can accelerate the acquisition of expertise. And these are good data. Remember, this is about 2.5 days of troubleshooting with items taken directly from fleet troubleshooting trouble tickets. Okay, so instructional design. We didn't say enough about instructional design, and I wish we had. Of course, Rich Mayer gave us a good set of things about what we might be concerned with, but the real issue is how, we can design games. We know how to build games. And the next thing is, after having built games, what we want to do is start with some instructional objectives. Sorry, I got to get my head in shape here. We wanted to start, because I'm trying to beat the clock here. So I've got 5 minutes and 17 seconds. Anyways, I got some time. But what you want to do is have a game that is instructional, right? So we kind of know how to design instruction, and we kind of know how to design games. We kind of know how to design instruction that achieves objectives. What I haven't seen yet is somebody start with some hardcore objectives and design a genuine game for achieving those objectives. That's very rare. And we don't have a technology for doing that. It's sort of an art form, if at best. And that requires, that is a real challenge, I think, for us who are interested in the use of games. Because it usually turns out to be either a game that doesn't teach, or it turns out to be a teaching sequence that, is not a game. Let's see, development authoring. There's a vision here floating around since the 1980s of the future, what the future will be. And the notion is that we will pull from the global information grid, the World Wide Web today, and who knows what it's going to be tomorrow, but we pull from that information that is needed in real time to satisfy a student and to develop the tutorial interactions that would provide instruction to the kid who wants to learn something. Now, we got into this business even in the 70s because we wanted to. We knew that computer-based instruction was effective, and it was also very expensive to produce. So the idea was, let's have the machine do it. So the notion is that the machine becomes a tutor and does all those things that a tutor does. And you saw earlier that we now have some evidence that can be done successfully. I'm not sure it's a game, but it is something that it met those early requirements. So the competition for games, of course, is intelligent tutoring systems. And, we could have intelligent games too, couldn't we? There's a world to be waiting for us. Anyways, the notion is that the student has a question, pulls it down from the web, the machine assembles the information for the student in a set of tutorial interactions, and off they go. Oh yeah, it's also problem solving too, which is why I asked about problem solving. But you'd think that was just, when I first started talking about this in the 80s, people said, well, that's crazy, it's not going to happen. The kindest thing people have said to me is now in the early 2000s or so, is that, well, it doesn't sound quite as crazy as it used to be. And Popovich, you heard what Popovich said, yesterday at lunch. He's got a good handle on that. Not only that, but about 3 weeks ago, I was in some NATO meeting in Germany, and the Croats have a handle on that. So I've tried to get the two together. You've got a Slav and a Croats trying to. Well, we'll see what happens about all that. But anyways, there's progress. It's hopeful. They've got a solid technical approach that looks like it might succeed. Okay, so much for that. Implementation, promoting. The one thing that I want to say, which is, Gurley started out on whatever day that was, Tuesday, first talk of the session, and she pointed out that we have all this good stuff, and it's not getting implemented. It's not being used in the schools. We have the same problem in the Department of Defense, where I work and try to advise the Office of the Secretary of Defense. And because, we got all this great stuff. We say, hey, look, we're doing this wonderful training. And they say, training, ho-hum. Who cares about training? Tell me what a pound of training is worth. And that's the thing. I can still see Admiral Kidd down at the end of the table saying, what is a pound of training worth? Because they have to make it, they're going to buy an airplane or they're going to buy training. Are they going to buy jet propulsion fuel? Or are they going to buy training? It's that kind of a problem. That's what those folks are thinking about. So you wonder why training gets, or education. They have the same thing for local leaders in the local school board. Are they going to buy sewers or are they going to buy training or education in that case? We need to make an economic case for training, return on investment. And you can find something like that. Here you can see some money being saved. This is an old slide. But it compares training using computer-based instruction against things like adult tutors, class sizes, adding 10 minutes a day, all these other possibilities. This turns out to be the winner. The second winner, of course, is peer tutoring. And you can put two students on a single computer, and it works really nice, particularly if you pair them. You get one really fast-learning kid and one really slow-learning kid. The fast-learning kid gets insight, slow-learning kid learns. It's a good deal. And as for that IT course that I showed you, I also did this, and you wave this around. I don't know if it's going to have any effect on anything, but over a period of 12 years, which turns out there's a reason for that, but comparing producing an expert with on-job training, over a period of 12 years, it's going to cost over $1 billion to do it the old way, and using this capability of producing expertise really wins big. So those are my comments. We, the researchers in this area, ought to get serious about return on investment. And Harry has heard that forever, and some of the other folks in the room too. But that's what we need to do to convince people to use our products. Thank you.
I'm going to try not to repeat what Dexter said. I agreed with all of it. And I'm just going to give some general comments about the workshop because, as you know, there were 27 presentations, not to count the demos and the luncheon speakers and whatever. So I've been taking notes in real time here, which is interesting. Just to reiterate one of the things that Dexter did say, that if you sort of buy into prior knowledge is probably the best signal cognitive predictor of the post-test, then one might expect to have all the games to have a pretest that had prior knowledge, because that's going to give you a big leg up in trying to predict who's going to do well or not well. You can also use for the adaptivity business, presumably you might want to treat the high prior knowledge people differently than the low prior knowledge people. So something that Rich Mayer said that I'm on board with, which is giving people choices who have no prior knowledge in an area, they don't have enough information to make a good choice. So your learner controlled inquiry approaches, I think work real well at the high end of the high prior knowledge business. So you can think of a tracking system that had different kind of instructional strategies depending upon how much prior knowledge you had. Seeing that games are fun and learning, I found it a little bit interesting that there wasn't much to say about the fun or how to measure it. And in the motivational area, I was sort of expecting to see some games that sort of try to increase motivation, because that would be useful. And again, from a predictor point of view, self-efficacy is probably the best signal motivational, confidence in your ability to accomplish the task. And on the other end of it, one's anxiety, in a negative sense, sort of gets in the way. So if you do prior knowledge, self-efficacy, and anxiety, you've got sort of like a big three of what you'd expect, which presumably would give you a fair amount of leverage on what you're doing. Like other people, that not everybody's doing transfer, and that's got to be the bottom line. And you teach differently for transfer than you do for other forms of learning. There was a lot of evaluation studies that were mentioned, and like Dexter, I also have been running around the defense community for some time. Their preferred model is by Kirkpatrick, and I happen to like it because it's got 4 pieces. And then you can count whether the particular game has the piece. Piece 1 is reaction. That's the smile test. How did you like it? Piece 2 is learning. Piece 3 is transfer. So you can run all these games through and decide, who did transfer or not. Because Kirkpatrick came out of industry, he's talking about learning transferring to the job. And that's the job of a student, of course, is other courses. And the job of a person being trained in industry, of course, is to do well on the job. And the final one, which speaks to the cost effectiveness business or return on investment, is the impact on the organization. If you implemented these games widely, what would the impact be on a district? You're going to save money or not, fewer teachers, better teachers, whatever. Something I think would be useful, because I realized that you only had 15 minutes, but there was a lot of good stuff there that you might want to try to get some of the stuff published, either in a special issue or edited book. If you were to do that, I would try to, for each and every paper, to be specific about the length of the time of the intervention. What was the dosage that they got? Was it 40 minutes, or in Dexter cases, when he's talking about a week's worth of instruction, that's 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. That's 40 hours of stuff. Whereas in most of the other stuff, you get an hour once a week for the math or whatever. Something else was mentioned, cognitive load theory. I happen to think is the best single theory that relates instruction to learning. And people's names in that area is Sweller, and Rich Mayer is another person there. So if that was new, it'd be useful to chase it down. I wanted to make some comments on some of the methodological issues too. And when they're talking about feedback, you know, in some cases there was showed no effect or little effect. And some of Mayer's work, if you look at that screen, that game screen, boy, is that busy. All sorts of stuff going on. And where is the feedback going? Well, that's being put on the same page, huh? So now you've got both the background and you've got the feedback, so you've even got more stuff to deal with. So cognitive load theory would say that that's going to result in negative learning. Mayer did something crafty, which is he said, that's probably going through your working memory visual. And if you could capture the working memory auditory, then things might be better. So you have the regular game going on, feedback goes through the ears, and Mayer reports effect sizes of greater than 1. That'd be relatively easy to implement. It's the same text. You're just speaking it rather than reading it. I'd also get into the habit of reporting the size of the effect so people can get an idea if it's a little or big. And that also would allow you to do a power analysis to say, did I run enough subjects to be able to make some assertions about, I have enough subjects that this all sort of makes sense. I was sort of surprised that there wasn't more talk on 21st century skills. Well, I'm on that bandwagon, so that's not a big surprise. Everybody's got their different models. Kind of popular nowadays is the deeper learning folks. There's about probably 50–60% overlap on skills between the various people. And I don't think it's too productive to say what the final list should be. I think more productive is to say, here's my measure of this construct. You bring your measure of your construct, and we'll measure things rather than talking about what they ought to be. Wow, that time really goes fast. You can look at learning as formal, informal, and implicit. Implicit learning is the unaware type of thing. I was sort of surprised that somebody wasn't working that side of the house. So the unconscious stereotyping business comes out of that literature. Some interesting things that I noticed was in general, I thought the empirical work was well done. I was sort of captivated by the ontologies. Common, it's in the content area, like math or physics, whatever. Uncommon, it's in the motivational area. So the social emotional learning stuff, or even a 21st century skill like problem solving, having an ontology behind it at some depth, wouldn't that be nice? And I think they got to start on that. I've been enamored about using Amazon Mechanical Turk. You know, that's the thing where Amazon, they pay 1 cent an hour or 5 cents an hour. So we ran a study for $50, 600 people. And that's how we did the formative evaluation on those icons. So I'll make up the numbers. It was like this. 95% of the people said that's stop. And only 50% of the people said that was leave the scene. So if you're in a bullying type of thing, you're supposed to say stop, and then you sort of leave the scene. Now these are kindergartens and first graders, so you can't use text. So ergo the icons. So I thought it was kind of crafty. The downside of it, they're adults, they're college graduates, and they're people who want to work for 5 cents an hour. So the generalizability, you got to think about that. The psychometric folks, I think, are making real progress on the computation models of what's going on in the processes. It's been amazing in the last 5 years, what's been going on there. Another thing, which is everybody says, you do the research study and then the whole thing dies. There's not a mechanism of getting it out to the schools, keeping it in the schools, and paying for it. And I thought the speaker was talking about different models of how to do this. It was really kind of interesting. I don't know whether $2 per person is going to work, but you need some sort of financial incentive to make the thing work after we're done. Another thing, if you think of testing or scores, it's kind of like three functions. You administer it, you score it, and you report it. So there's got to be reports coming out at the end, and the reports, of course, are for students and parents and whatever. And I think a really psychometric challenge is if you're producing a report of text, so it makes sense to the parent or the kid, then what's the evidence base for those assertions at the sentence or paragraph level? So there's more work to be done on the reporting side of it as well on the scoring side of it. Almost all the work you heard today was in the low stakes area. And a lot of good work in psychometrics has been in the high stakes area. I think ETS is mainly the high stakes business. There was one assumption in the psychometric area which talked about once you're in a mastery state, you remain there. There's a body of literature called skill decay. This is forgetting over time when you're not practicing the task, which is not uncommon, particularly if you don't have the curriculum sequenced the right way. So you could teach something early, and then later on, you're coming back to it. So there's a lot of evidence that procedural tasks which have multiple steps, the information's forgotten pretty quickly. So with that knowledge, you could sort of decide, do I even want to teach it? Because if the next time they're getting it is a year later and they've forgotten 100% of it in 6 months, that would give you an idea of maybe I don't want to teach that there anyways. The military ran into that I'll make up a story, which is dermatologists get sent over to Afghanistan. And he's not dealing dermatologies, he's dealing wounds and combat stuff. He spends 9 months there, goes back to the States on a Friday. Monday morning, he's back being a dermatologist. He has not practiced dermatology skills for 6 or 9 months. And there's forgetting curves of what that person doesn't know. So I wouldn't want to be the Monday morning person in dermatology. And we've got this, unfortunately, with the thing of all the getting out of all the wars, we've got to train people for the next war in combat, and there's no combat, thankfully. So all those skills are going to be decaying. So the closer you get to sort of like industry or training or post-secondary type stuff, the more I think you got to worry this problem. Something which was made me humble was multi-dimensional IRT, fully Bayesian approach, dynamic Bayesian network for game-based assessment. The one I liked Lee had, multi-level, multi-dimensional IRT. Wow. So if I can get that down between now and next year, life is going to be great. What should we be doing next? We did a lot of talk about the multidisciplinary. Well, that comes down to more people, practically speaking. More people cost more money. And therefore, and if there's a learning curve of the multidisciplinary people getting to know the vocabulary and the culture and the whatever, you got to put more money up front to facilitate this type of interaction. I've been recently doing some work in the medical area, and there's a case where I've never been to a medical conference. I don't read medical journals. Conversely, they don't read our stuff either, right? So whatever truth you have in your silo, the other discipline doesn't know anything about it. So the computer science folks, in general, don't know the learning science stuff. And in general, the learning science folks, in general, don't know the other stuff. So it's more than just getting 4 people in a room. It's going to take a while. What else needs to be done? There ought to be an assessment toolkit. We should be able to make the whole greater than the sum of its parts. And I wouldn't make it for teachers. At least in California, they don't have a course in measurement and teacher training. So teaching novices how to use a tool to develop tests, I think, is not a good idea. But that type of thing could be like the modeling stuff we heard earlier, that software in the CAD/CAM area. We could have the same type of thing for experts who wanted to do the assessment business. I think the useful for almost everybody who's got the data is to redo the analyses to answer the equity questions. So instead of using socioeconomic status or race or ethnicity as a covariate and sort of like getting rid of it, I think it'd be useful to report that information. So you could find out perhaps that games are more or less effective for a particular group. People have been talking about getting hints and help. My experience is people don't use help systems. I mean, I actually ran a study, middle school biology, peer tutoring. Then we had AP kids that are going to the next level up when you have the instructor. Ran something like 128 people. Not one person asked for help. Zero. Felt bad for the student because their student was on help systems, right? No data. The other thing I think would be useful to do, which is to create a test bed. And I don't think we need a lot of them, but we need one big one with a lot of stuff in it. So if you think of high energy physics, like the accelerator, there's only like 3 or 4 of them in the world. Or you think astronomy, there's only so many radio telescopes and so many optical, and then the whole community sort of gets around that. So I think we could get that up and running for 10 years for well under $1 billion. Probably 300 or 400 million, my guess. You take that number, divide by 10, and then decide how many groups you'd have to make that thing work, and how much support capability you'd have to have. So you could sort of get the return on investment by deciding if you really ratcheted up educational research so you had some good numbers, and you could test in this particular environment. It'd be third-party evaluation. Wow, that'd be useful. So that's the end of my story, which is send me $1 billion and I'll do 2 of them for you.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Harry.